Hi, I'm Jim Cutsinger, and I want to talk about the left-right divide in our country today and what's been going on for a while. And I'm hoping that somehow I'll find a few people that listen to this that are capable and ready to make a change and to wake up. I know that's bold on my part to say that I'm the one that's going to wake you up. No, I can't do that. But I can point out some things that I have seen. I've been fortunate to see and learn, and I want to share these things with you and see if you can find something of value in it. See if there's something that rings true for you, and see if it's something that's worth looking into. So I want to talk about the left-right divide in our country now. And I want to start out with you and me. How do we form our political opinions? How do we form our worldview, our sense of what's right and wrong, what's important to us, and who we belong, who we align ourselves with, and maybe who we align ourselves against? So if you look at that, most of us think, well, I look at the information and I make choices. I try to educate myself or learn something, and I try to do the things that just make common sense. I try to use my common sense to learn what's probably true, and to think about it a little bit and listen to people talk, and then make a decision about what seems right. There's been a lot of studies recently. I think there was a study by the Pew Foundation and some other people about how do people decide on who to vote for president. And in the long run, when they really do the statistical analysis and data study over a long period of time and take a look and really suss out that equation, what they find out is that the most powerful thing, probably the largest influence, the most influential thing on how people make political decisions and decide who to vote for, is that they vote for the people, they vote the same as the people around them. Of course, they had a process where they learned and looked at the information and heard it talked about, and maybe watched television, read the internet, looked at the internet, and picked up a lot of information. So here's my proposal. Here's what I'm proposing. I'm proposing that process, especially as it happens in the real world, especially in our country today, doesn't work. It's a failing process. It really doesn't work, and let me see if I can convince you to even consider why it doesn't work. What happens is we tend to isolate ourselves, and people always have. It's totally natural. We isolate ourselves with the people who are most like us. Usually that's based on socioeconomic factors, on racial factors, on cultural values. So we tend to want to be with people, and we gravitate toward being around people that we're comfortable with. Familiarity is really the biggest factor. We tend to want to be with people and places and with groups that we're most familiar with. That's where we're most comfortable most of the time. Sure, there are some people that aren't like that, of course, but I'm speaking in generalities. I'm speaking about most of us. Most of us at the end of the day turn to what's comfortable for us, to the things we're most familiar with, to the people, the thoughts, the ideas, the understandings. So what do? We have our television shows. We have our news channels we watch. We have the newspapers we read. And what you find is that in this country is you have one group of people that reads different newspapers, reads different books, watches different television shows, lives in a different culture with the people they're familiar with. The people in Kansas live with the people they're familiar with. The people in San Francisco live generally around the people they're most familiar with. I think a good way to demonstrate the truth of this is to use an example. I'm a liberal, although now I consider myself a liberal and not even a centrist liberal, but post-liberal. like something that steps beyond where I look at conservative and liberal, and I look at what seems right and what doesn't seem right on both sides. So I don't form my political opinions or my beliefs anymore out of the people I'm around, or out of the people that say the things that are most comfortable to me, or the things that I've learned to believe. I've learned to really challenge myself, and I became quite dissatisfied with my life. And I looked a lot more critically, and I really realized that the way things go is that we all live in our own bubble. We all live in a bubble, and that bubble becomes transparent. We can't see it. It just seems like life. It just seems like this is the way it is. And every culture is like that. Whether you're a bushman in Brazil, or in Africa, or an Eskimo, or you're somebody living on the 100th floor on Manhattan, or if you're living next to a silo in Kansas, or if you're living out in the woods in Southern California. I happen to be in the woods in Southern California. That's not where I live, but I'm out here for the couple of days for some R&R to do some thinking and writing. So people that are liberal, which are the people I'm most familiar with, so I'm going to use the critique on them because I am a liberal. It's something I've learned about myself, is you look at people that are activists or people that are in favor of racial justice, and that are very much proponents of Black Lives Matter. Of course, no one can argue with Black Lives Matter. I mean, so let me be clear. I have no argument with that statement. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter just as much as mine or anybody else's, and I'm committed to that. But what you get is people begin to take sides. People begin to take sides, and they begin to see racial injustice as a map of oppressors and the oppressed. And of course, oppressors and oppressed, that's legitimate. There is oppression, and there are oppressors, and there are the oppressed. Such a thing is true. This is the problem with truth. You can take it too far. What happens is people start to see the world. They start to see the country. They start to see themselves and others as the oppressors and the oppressed. Once you begin to see that world, once you go down that rabbit hole and begin to see the world in terms of the oppressors and the oppressed, you start to move away from what's really going on. Because that's just a slice. That's a small part of what's true. Like this idea of, this idea that all people that live in the South are racists and bigots, or the idea that if you're not for Black Lives Matter and the things that they promote, if they're promoting, all right, we're going to defund the police, part of the problem is the police. Sure, police have done bad things, but now we're saying part of the problem is the police. We're seeing the police through the lens of oppressor. Bad idea. We're seeing a group of people through the lens of oppression, a racist. Really bad idea. Not even close to true. Okay? So these are the kind of extremes that get us into trouble. And that put us in a bubble, because we're in a bubble with people who are doing the same thing. They dislike other people, and what happens is the two groups begin to watch for the bad behavior on both sides. So they bring out the worst in each other. And as they bring out the worst in each other, this funny thing happens. And you'll notice that there's a hypocrisy on both sides, because what you'll find is that when either side preaches about what is good and what they believe in, when they're confronted with their opposite, and when they look for the bad and they're confronted in the bad and the opposite, they stoop to the same level. I've heard people that take the moral high ground against Trump talk just like Trump, say things about him and say things about his followers that sounds bigoted, that They have racial overtones. They use bigoted language. They use dehumanizing language, name calling. I'm not saying not saying we should never do that or that's always wrong, but it's misleading. And over time, what happens is we begin to dehumanize ourselves, and we begin to dehumanize others. And when we begin to dehumanize others, we are now going over to the dark side. We are now in the process of believing our own projections en masse. It's like we're in a group hypnosis. We all believe this thing because it's the easiest thing to believe. It's the simplest. It's something we can all gather around and we can fight for moving our cause forward. But what happens is we start to dehumanize the other side. And if you listen to the great leaders of social change and of social justice in our history, which are Mahatma Gandhi, if you listen to Martin Luther King and a number of people like that, you will not hear these things that I hear. You will hear the truth about brotherhood, about reaching out to others, about nonviolence, about respect, about compassion, about listening, about understanding, about truth, about trusting and turning toward the good in all people. That's how social change happens. But if we blind ourselves to the good in others, if we blind ourselves to situations by living in a bubble, and by slowly getting on this slippery slope of dehumanizing our opponents and name-calling them and starting to see because some police do some bad things, the problem is the police. Or because slavery was fought against by the South, now we don't like the South. You know, whatever it is, whatever your prejudice, whatever your particular bigotry is. We're bigots against white people. A lot of liberals are bigots against white people. White people are the reason that black people suffer. That's not true. There are white people that have participated in the oppression of black people. There's no doubt about it. But white people don't have a corner on oppression. And it's not about white people. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You're going to tell some 12-year-old kid that he's responsible for the systemic racism? No, it's not true. Systemic racism is overreaching too. It is part of a system, but we can't change it unless we understand what it is and how it works. But if we dehumanize the others, we stop understanding. I'll give you an example. I pointed out how liberals, how all of us tend to be with our own people. Well, if you are a believer in integration and racial equality, and especially, let me talk to you if you're a white person. If you believe in racial integration and equality, and you're very much on the side of we are against the conservatives for these reasons. If you really find yourself offended by the conservatives, let me ask you, do you ever do self-analysis about yourself? Did you ever take a look at your own life? Like, if you're a white person, when's the last time you had dinner with a black person? Let me ask you, what neighborhood did you decide to move into? What school did you decide to go to? When's the last time you went on a trip with a black person? When's the last time you had a conversation? Do you have any black friends? This doesn't mean I'm saying you're a racist. It means that there are more things going on. What it means is there are other issues. You can't understand what I'm talking about by looking at everything as oppressors and the oppressed, because that's not what's going on. People are living their normal lives in different ways. So let me cut down to the simplest part of this. Simplest explanation I have is it's a cultural thing. People live in different cultures. And when you live in a culture, that's your world. That's what you see as the world. That's what your common sense is. And you believe that's the way it is. And anybody that's not in that world looks strange. And you're going to judge them by your cultural values and not understand theirs. And that's the way it is. So if I'm educated, semi-urban, suburban white guy, I probably have no idea about a guy in Kansas or a rapper in New York City or a Chinese person living in San Francisco. I have no idea what their worldview is. Now, I try to learn that, but my natural thing, and if I go and judge if I judge each one of those people by my cultural standards, well, it looks like everybody else is kind of crazy. Now, is this a horrible thing? It's not a horrible thing. There's a natural explanation for this. A lot of things we're fighting against are our own nature. It's natural to be with those that you want to be with. It's natural to be with those that you're familiar with. If you believe in evolution or biological psychology, which says our native natural biological instincts are healthy. Each group is an evolutionary experiment to see what's going to work the best. That's how we got here. We got here by nature has different experiments. And one culture is one kind of experiment, and another culture is another kind of experiment. The one that flourishes and does the best will tend to grow, and the ones that don't will tend to fall down. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this in a positive way. I'm not saying this in a way to put one above the other, but there are natural hierarchies. I'm not trying to put somebody above each other so that then they can oppress them or win against them or beat them or hurt them. That does happen. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. That's not what I'm advocating. But what I'm advocating is understanding of the native biological instincts that people have, and that's to be around people you're familiar with, to choose the situations. That's what feels good. And it's natural to be drawn to your own kind. That's not an evil thing. That's not an evil thing. So I'm trying to release some of the judgment and some of the hatred that goes on both sides, because hatred's not going to move us forward. What's going to move us forward is growing and learning from each other. And to do that, you have to put your judgments aside to find out what you think. If what you think is really true, you need to put your judgments to the test and not look for what you already believe, but go and experience. So what I do is I'll listen to Fox News and I'll listen to right-wing radio, and I hear their bigotry really easy. I've been schooled in it, so I hear it. I hear when bigotry exists, but then if I get past that and I start listening and looking for the good stuff, and looking for the strength, and looking for the, there's a reason why whenever you have a group of people that's millions of people, there's a reason why they're living the way they live and why they believe the way they believe. And I can't understand that because I don't have their experience. So the bridge is human experience. There was a woman on the radio a while back who was working for gay rights. And she said she had participated tirelessly as an activist, and she had worked with thousands of people for years and years. And you know what she said was the most powerful thing? The most powerful thing that they did that made the most change was that they made some movies. When they started to make movies that portrayed people of non-binary sexuality, when they made a movie that was like a real movie and people that hated gays watched it, people that were prejudiced against gays saw the movie, she said there was more transformation there than in anything else she had done, because it went to the heart of experience, of seeing someone. People that are anti-gay, all of a sudden they have a daughter maybe, or a friend. If there's someone that they know in their world who maybe is important to them or related to somebody important to them, that's the opportunity. It doesn't always work, but that's the time when you'll see where the growth happens and where the change happens. That's how social change happens. People's hearts are open. They have an experience. They see for themselves. So that's what I'm promoting for us, is to see for yourself. And in closing, here's something I can say to sum up this whole thing. If you want to take a look at how ridiculous the division is, to really be fighting one group against another over every issue, diametrically opposed on each issue. If you want to see how ridiculous that is for an individual to make the choice to stay with their group. Now, I'm not saying it's stupid to stay with your group, but I'm saying if you want to know what's true, to take your truth from the group you're with and not understand the truth in the other group, either way is really not good, especially when it comes to America and trying to run a country together. So, here's my example of why that's not good. If I look at the conservative milieu, if I look at their values, I look at what's important to them, I look at the legislation they pass, I look at the things they fight for and the things they fight against. And if I look at that whole thing and I look and go, what's the most common value that's underneath each one of those? What is it? If I look at what's the common thing, is there a thread behind all of that? And I would say the largest thread, the most common thing that they feature is personal responsibility. It kind of comes out of a worldview that life is tough, life is difficult, and the best thing you can do is be the best you can do, is to be the best you are. And it's your job to do everything you can to make the world the way you want it to be. And to be the person, it's your responsibility. You are responsible. If I look over on the left, if I look at what the liberals value most, I grew up in this. I am one. What we value most, what we think is most important, the legislation, the agenda, the values, everything we pursue and the way we make decisions is guided by a different principle. It's actually two opposite principles that need to be in balance. Over here at the liberal side, what I see is the fundamental principle is compassion. We need to not leave anyone out. We need to take care of us, the we. We need to take care of all of us. We need to take care of each other. So, two different worldviews, right? One, take responsibility. The other, we need to take care of each other. We need to have compassion. We need to look to others and make sure we're all okay and that we're all in this together. Right? So, my point is if you're in either one of those groups, and that's the lens you see every issue from, you're going to be lost. And both groups are going to be way out of balance. Because if I live my life too biased towards we need to look out for each other, we need to have empathy, we need to take care of each other, if I live my life by that, and I suddenly don't pay enough attention to my personal responsibility, which is very easy to do because personal responsibility is not easy, it's hard. If I do that, I pay the price. I'll pay the price by lack of fulfillment, by lack of fulfillment, by lack of feeling like I have the strength and power in my own life to have areas where I'm the captain of my own ship, where I can create what I want, where I can have the life I want, where I have some say and about who I am and what I do, to the point that feels like I'm actually taking the gifts that I've been given and growing them and nurturing them in a robust way that makes me feel fully alive and more of an individual. That's what I'm missing. And I grew up as a liberal and I didn't get enough of that. I got some of it. I got it in good doses. Personal responsibility was not missing on the liberal side. I got it. But I fell into the trap of being more about the we and everything that goes with that. Over here on the right, it's the same problem. If you see everything as individuals and you fall into that trap, you end up alone. You end up not having a group. You end up not taking care of your culture, your group, it's two highly functional principles that we know both need to have in balance. Some people are going to be more liberal. Some people are going to be more conservative. There's personal difference, and there's also cultural difference. So my suggestion is to watch the news that's the news you love to hate. And watch it and start watching for the good in it. Look over on the other side of the fence and get past your judgments and get past those quick things where you go, well, this looks like racism and that looks like this and they're against the environment and da-da-da. And look a little deeper and take time and get yourself an education. And I would say, isn't that what a good liberal does? Aren't we supposed to be multicultural? I think we're multicultural with everybody except the people that we're fighting at this point. I don't think we're multicultural with them at all. So I know I wasn't. So, and vice versa. Because what you'll find out, and once you see it, it's shocking, it's stunning, when you realize how biased the media is and how biased we all are against each other, especially at this point. We are biased and it's not true. We don't understand the culture. We don't understand the people. But if you don't take time, if you're not willing to open up, it's so much easier to stay in your group. And what I'm suggesting is hard and difficult and challenging. But when you're ready, if you are open-minded and you are ready, you will get the benefit of wisdom and maturity and understanding that is what we need right now in our world. That's what we need in our world. We're at a critical time, and we need your wisdom and your maturity and your understanding and your listening and your compassion and your personal responsibility, and you taking responsibility for doing whatever you can do and whoever you can be, and for you having compassion and understanding that includes the people you disagree with and the people you fight against. There's nothing wrong with fighting. If you're fighting, if you draw a line in the sand of you may pick something on the environment or with race or at any point, there's nothing wrong with taking a stand and drawing a line in the sand. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm not saying either side shouldn't do that. You can draw a line to contain or to stop something you don't think is right. But don't do it at the expense of dehumanizing the others, and don't do it at the expense of your compassion and understanding. Keep your compassion and understanding up front. Keep your personal responsibility up front. Take responsibility. If I don't take responsibility socially, what do? I whine and complain. And I go, God, isn't it awful? I can't tell you how many conversations I've been about how awful Trump is, but none of those conversations ever talk about what we need to do besides maybe at the election we can get rid of him. That's about as far as it goes. And that's insufficient. We're facing much more complex problems now. So if you've stayed with me this far, please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Subscribe. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.